Who went in first?
I guess that's me. During the Vietnam War, when the draft started, I got a low number. So immediately I knew that if I ever entered the draft, it would be quick. And sure enough, a few years later, I been in school, didn't make the grades, and I was in the draft pretty quickly. I didn't worry about the military or, at that time, going to Vietnam. My only thing I remember being concerned about was my family, especially my mom, who was in poor health. I believed that she might not be able to survive her only son going to war. But I got ready, and in June 1967, I reported for basic training at Fort Polk, Louisiana.
My dad's a World War II era veteran, and my uncle flew bombers over Germany. When I was a kid, we went on a family vacation to Colorado, visited the Air Force Academy. I was really impressed. Decided right then and there that's where I wanted to go. When it came time to apply, I wore glasses and I wasn't sure I could get into the Air Force. So I applied to West Point instead. Going to a service academy is a big deal. It takes your congressperson to get in. It's a full ride scholarship. But in Wisconsin in 1971, the Vietnam War was so unpopular, mine was the only scholarship that they did not announce at the high school graduation.
Well, I joined the military out of survival. I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, and that was one violent place. Somewhere around my first year of high school, I had a nervous breakdown, and I started hearing voices, and they were telling me I am so useless, I should just kill myself. Of course, severe panic attacks followed that. And after a while, I just hid away in an attic because I couldn't be around people anymore. I was up there for 4 years. Somewhere around my senior year in high school, I woke up. But by then I had one sibling dead, and most of my friends were either dead prostitutes or on drugs. I think God put me in that attic to get me away from all that. But now I'm awake and I'm like, I got to get the hell out of here. I call a recruiter up, I tell him my story, and I'm thinking he's just going to go, oh, hell no. But I think he took some kind of pity on me. And he said, okay. So I joined the Army.
I just needed to get out of my house. My mom's bipolar, was married 7 times, and on top of that, she didn't take her medication. Each of my stepfathers were either alcoholics, drug addicts, or abusive in some way, mentally, physically, emotionally. So in the middle of my senior year, I was engaged to a Marine. He was a year older than me, and he would tell me, you'd never make it as a Marine. So I took it as challenge accepted. So the day after I graduated from high school in June of 1996, I went to boot camp.
My mother passed when I was just an infant. I often tell people not to feel sorry for me though, because everyone wanted to raise me. She was like the favorite aunt. You could say that for a while, and even today, I'm the community child. 9/11 happened my freshman year of high school. A lot of kids went home early that day. When I went home, I remember seeing my dad glued to the TV. I really didn't understand what was going on at first, but I know I felt that there had to have been something more that I could do. By my senior year, I had 2 plans: get the hell out of Galveston County and go to college. However, a recruiter met me at work one day and told me that I could actually have the best of both worlds. I could serve my country and go to college, and they would pay for it. That sounded really good to me. So, in the summer of 2005, I joined the Texas Army National Guard. I mean, How bad could the guard be?
Well, my story is a little bit different. I'm an attorney, and when I was just starting out in my career, I landed a really big piece of litigation, environmental litigation, where I was going to be representing a province in the Philippines against a big Canadian mining company. And it had me traveling a lot, especially to Manila. Several times a year, I would be visiting there for work, interviews, depositions, that kind of thing. And I loved it. Manila, it's a really transient place. It's an expat city. People come and go. They're only there for weeks or months at a time. And so you just kind of make friends with whoever's around, and they're your friends while you're there, and you may keep in touch or not afterwards. Well, I remember on one of my trips, I was out with a group of girlfriends on Wednesday night at a very crowded restaurant, and one of them happened to notice that there were 2 American men sitting off by themselves, and she invited them to join us. Well, as is the custom, they just sort of glommed onto our group and did whatever we did for the week. Whether it was going to a bar or going to a party, maybe some videoke, kind of making fools of ourselves, just generally having a good time. An entire 5 days went by before I ever even said a word to Jake. But when we did start talking, we figured out that we had a lot in common. I learned through those conversations that he was Army. Not just Army, but Special Forces. In fact, he was in the Philippines doing things that he couldn't even talk to me about. And he was there a lot longer than I was. After I went back home to Houston, we primarily communicated over text. And then we started writing each other letters, handwritten letters. And we actually still do that today. Just a tradition that we've kept up with through the years. When he got back to the States, he was stationed at Fort Lewis in Washington, and I was based in Houston. So we started flying back and forth to see each other, and about 2 years later, we got married. It's funny, I actually can remember times when I was a little girl thinking about who I might marry one day. Like maybe I'll marry a scientist, or maybe I'll marry a teacher. But I cannot remember once, ever, thinking that I was going to marry a soldier. What's ironic about that is Jake tells everyone when we talk about our story that if he'd figured out I was an attorney just a little bit sooner, things might have turned out differently. I think he might actually mean that. But in any case, I'm a military spouse, which means I never put on the uniform, and I did not take the oath.
I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that
I will bear true faith and allegiance to same, and that I
will obey the orders of the President of the United States, the orders of the officers appointed over me, per regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God.
So help me God.
so help me God.
So help me God. I actually swore in twice.
Really?
Yes, once for the state of Texas and once to protect the United States of America.
Wow.
Yep.
Officers swear a different oath.
It's not a competition, Dave.
Officers swear to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. There is no mention of the president.
Wait, so you're an officer.
Yes.
You didn't go to basic training?
West Point.
I'm gonna need you to have a seat, sir. Watch this. I had absolutely no idea what to expect in basic training. I mean, the best advice my father could give me is, all they can do is yell at you. I've been doing that to you your entire life. The first part, you go through this whole intake process. I mean, there's paperwork and then tons of uniforms. They have you stuff them in your duffel bags. Then, in the wee hours of the morning, you take that duffel bag onto a bus. You've got all your gear. Everyone's talking about all the rumors. They talk about getting smoked, and I'm not worried about getting smoked because I'm in track shape. But then, all of a sudden, the bus comes to a big halt. And all I remember seeing is a big brimmed hat. Get off my bus! Get off my bus! Move, move, move! This ain't your mama's house! Group, halt! Right? Base! shit. Shit is right, Private. Y'all think this private right here, cause I'm about to smoke y'all asses. The side straddle hop. Cherry pickers. High knees. Group halt. Recover.
You know, I didn't mind people barking in my face all the time. The difficult part for me was all these people. Like I had to shower with 50 different women.
Oh.
I was so nervous about taking my clothes off, I showered with them on.
Girl, take your clothes off.
Oh yes, I can. It was strange. I entered the military not quite as crazy as I was, but not quite sane yet either.
Let me tell you about a story when I went to boot camp. So I was using the bathroom, taking a number 2, and I was relaxing. You couldn't lock the door, but I was still relaxing.
Boom! You're done.
I mean, my Jones instructor scared the shit back inside of me. I don't know how your body does it, but it just does it. It just adapts.
At West Point, the pressure was also unrelenting. They never physically hazed us, but the mental part was much worse. It got so bad one day that my roommate forgot his name. They took him to the psych ward at the hospital, and I never saw him again. But there was a reason for the mental pressure. On the battlefield, things can happen very fast, and you got to keep it together, or bad things will happen. If you've got 20 things to do and time for only 5, you've got to be able to figure out which 5 are the most important. At West Point, they're the 5 that if you do them, you'll get in the least amount of trouble. On the battlefield, they're the 5 that keep your people alive and accomplish the mission.
Fall in. Double time. Move. Left, 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 right. Recruiter asked Johnny what he wanted to be.
I want to be in the infantry.
So Johnny took a plane to Vietnam.
Fight some people called the Viet Cong.
Group halt. Dismissed.
After basic at Fort Polk, Louisiana, I got orders to at the Advanced Infantry School there in Fort Polk. After completing Advanced Infantry training, I got orders to attend the Non-Commissioned Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia. After 23 weeks, I got orders to report back to Fort Polk, where I was now going to be an instructor at the Advanced Infantry School. We completed Advanced Infantry and had our orders to Vietnam. Manny, a dear friend who was in a trainee and an old dear friend from back home, and I traveled to Tacoma. Upon arrival at Tacoma, I ran into some dear friends from the NCO Academy. We had a few beers, late dinner, and just a few minutes before midnight, we reported to Fort Lewis. I remember arriving at Fort Lewis to these horrendous lines of soldiers waiting to be processed for Vietnam. We quickly huddled, decided that we would return to Tacoma, get a room, and come back the next day. I remember driving out of Fort Lewis, and my friend Manny says, "You know, I'm going to Vietnam. Good chance I might not make it home, and I've never been drunk." We went back to Tacoma, got a room, and Manny got drunk that very first night. He didn't drink any of the other nights because we stayed in Tacoma for about 4 nights. I remember we would take turns wiring home for money. Finally, one of the guys says, "Look, they're probably looking for us. We better report." They were looking for us. When we reported, they put us in a holdings company. We were there for 3 or 4 days. I remember going before a JAG officer and signing an Article 15 for being AWOL, absent without leave. I also remember that the fine was $47.50. Now we had our ticket. We were finally getting on the big bird to go meet Charlie. Arriving in Vietnam, I was assigned to a mechanized outfit with the 173rd. TED had just ended in '68, and there had been 40% casualties in my unit. So I was one of many replacements. I was put in the first squad of the 1st Platoon of A Company because it was one of the platoons that had an E5. I was going to shadow an E5 before taking over one of the other squads. The combat assault, or my first combat assault, came quickly. Seemed like only a couple of days after I got in there. I remember the whole company going down to the landing strips, standing in front of a chopper. I was in one of the first choppers because 1st Platoon was going to be taking the lead. Being in the first squad, the 1st Platoon, I was on in the lead chopper. I remember sitting there under that chopper, and suddenly the company clerk appears right in front of us. He starts talking to the squad leader. He tells the squad leader, "Your early out came in. You're not going out. You're going home." The squad leader turns to me, shakes my hand, says, "I'm sorry. You've got the training. You can do this. Good luck." I don't remember ever feeling any fear. I must have suppressed those feelings because I remember leaving on that mission. I was now in charge of 8 guys. We were the lead shopper, and so I must have suppressed them, and I know that it is something that I did throughout my time in Vietnam. I did complete my time in Vietnam. I got home, I completed school, got married, had a kid, and I got into an incredible career in the criminal justice system that led to an appointment to the federal probation system.
So the question is, why did I stay in the Army after my 5-year commitment for West Point was up? It wasn't just because I liked being an Army officer. There was more to it than that. Years later, when some of my junior officers were thinking about getting out of the Army, I remember telling them, look around, ask yourself, are you your troops' best chance at survival? I think that's what I always tried to be, my troops' best chance. Leadership is about symbolism and storytelling. Officers ask their troops to do things that a rational person would not do. A rational person would run away. So why do they stay and fight? A big part of it has to do with not wanting to let their buddies down. But I believe that leaders play a role as well. Let me give you an example. In 1985, I was commanding the Port Construction Company in Virginia. We were about to undergo a strict compliance inspection, the kind where the inspectors keep looking until they find something wrong. And they always find something wrong. Nobody's perfect. So I gathered the company together and I told them, these guys are out to get us. And if this company comes through the inspection without any major deficiencies, I will dye my hair green for a week. I wasn't too worried about that happening, Nobody had ever passed one of these inspections before. Well, my troops proved me wrong. They passed with flying colors. So I went down to the post exchange and bought some cans of fluorescent green spray paint. And every morning for a week, I painted my hair green and went into the company area. On the second day, I went out in the hall to get a drink at the water fountain. There was a young troop at the hallway. He looked at me and gestured in an exaggerated way as if to say, "I can't believe your hair is green." I played along, asked him what was wrong. He said, "Your hair's green." I said, "Well, don't you remember? I told you I would dye it green if the company passed the inspection." He said, "I remember, but you're an officer. You don't have to do what you say." That was a wake-up call. I had 10 lieutenants in the company with me, and we went straight to work. I got on my soapbox and went crazy preaching that officers must do what they say they're going to do. Trust and confidence, that's what builds cohesion in a unit. And officers have to show that by what they say as well as by what they do. Leadership, too often, is an assigned position. But followership is always optional. And the followers are watching the leaders to decide whether they're worth following. Good officers understand that. They know they've got to earn it every day.
I was trained as a psychiatric counselor. Here I am on a lockdown psychiatric unit, and I'm thinking, how appropriate. My first duty station was Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I had experience after experience. Like this one time, this young troop ran up and just tackled me, knocked me flat. I'm like, great, now I'm going to die on a psychiatric unit. But I noticed he was actually protecting my head. So I'm like, what are we doing? He says, "I'm protecting you from the planes overhead." I'm like, this guy is too young to have been in any wars, and I haven't heard of any conflicts that we're in right now anyway. And I'm like, where are we? And he goes, "I can't tell you that." That made me saner. The military teaches us how to control our emotions, but it also teaches us how to bury them. That helps us deal with the trauma. While I was on vacation, a friend of mine died. He got stuck between the sink and the toilet. Rigor mortis set in, and he got stiff. The coroner goes, I can't move him. He's stuck." So I tell the coroner, "Listen, go ahead. I got this." I bend down, and I start breaking all of his limbs, starting with his arm. The sound of all those bones crashing was horrible. But I broke enough body parts to free him. Then the coroner was able to take him away. It was strange having a dead, cold person holding him up against me. It was helpful that I didn't feel anything. I really love working at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, no matter what I saw. We got a guy on the unit. He He got trapped under a cannon as it fired. If you hear a cannon from even 20 feet out, it will scare the shit out of you. This guy got caught under it. The sound tore him apart. He went deaf. The doctor said his hearing, it returned to him, but his deafness is now somatic. That means he turned his hearing off. He associated the sound with trauma. So if he couldn't hear, no stress. So we thought, okay, great. We'll just walk him around and try and make him feel safe. One day, we're over here just talking, and he suddenly goes, "What?" We were like, okay, he feels safe now. I got out of the military, and when you get out, you realize how crazy all that shit was after you're done bearing all your emotions. I think it happens to a lot of military people. You know, we get out, we've seen death and suffering, and now we're just living in all these creature comforts. It doesn't seem real. And we don't want to deal with people who don't quite understand that. One day I walked out of my apartment. I took half my shit and I just threw it in the garbage. And I took the other half and I threw it in a storage locker. And for a while, I slept in the storage locker with my stuff. It was great. All I had to do at night is pull down the storage locker door. I already had my pillow and my blanket in there with me. It was so dark, and it was so beautiful.
I was in Saudi Arabia and Iraq with the 101st Airborne during the first Gulf War. A couple days before the ground attack, a helicopter crashed outside our perimeter one night. We jumped up, threw on our clothes, and raced out to see what had happened. I remember headlights from the vehicles. It was a surreal scene, like something out of Hollywood. We called for a medevac, and when I heard the helicopter coming, I went out into the desert and in the darkness raised my hands as if so that I could guide it in, just the way they taught us at the Air Assault School. Either the pilot didn't see me, or he just ignored me. But instead of landing where I wanted him, he landed someplace else. I remember feeling kind of foolish standing out there in the darkness with my hands in the air and no helicopter to control. The pilot of the helicopter that had crashed was killed, and after we'd loaded the survivors onto the medevac, I found myself carrying the stretcher with the body of the dead pilot on it. I remember getting a sick feeling in my stomach because his leg was broken just above the ankle. And when we tried to lower the stretcher to the ground, his foot kept getting caught underneath. You hope for intensity in your life. Intensity can be good or bad. It is never boring. I spent 7 months in Saudi Arabia and called home 3 times. Communications weren't what they are today. But as an officer, I could have gotten to a telephone, but my troops couldn't. And I decided that I'd take a stand and I wouldn't call home until they'd all had the opportunity. It was my way of keeping faith with them and sharing the burden of discomfort. In a way, I think I was trying to live up to that line in the commander's prayer. Lord, Help me hold the lives of my soldiers as dearly as I hold my own.
I spent my first 7 months of training at Camp Lejeune as electrical equipment repair specialist. My first duty station was Okinawa, Japan. I loved Japan. The sushi was cheap and the people were so kind and generous. While in Japan, back in 1996, the Marine Corps was so much different. Like, for instance, I worked in this bay and there was all these pictures of these naked chicks on the wall, and the Marines talked any which way they wanted. This one time, this Marine told me, I asked him to move this generator in the wrong space, and he told me, "Hey, you stupid cunt." And I was like, what the hell? I ended up telling my sergeant, because I was only a PFC at the time. I didn't want him to get in trouble. I definitely didn't want him to get kicked out. But it ended up that he harassed other females. So, unfortunately, he did get kicked out. But that gave me a bad name in my unit and within my company. So, no one talked to me for a while. Some time went by, and the people in my shop asked me to go out one night. And I was excited because I was pretty much blackballed for a while. So we go out as a group, and we're hanging out, drinking and stuff. And later on that night, my corporal walks me back to my room. When we got back to my room, my roommate wasn't in our room. And that was the night that I was raped. I didn't tell anyone because I knew I couldn't. Because if they blackballed me for telling on the Marine for getting called a cunt, what would they do if I said I got raped? I had to continue to work with my corporal every day, and it made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to scream. I hated it. I hated him. It wasn't until I got put on my first of 2 MUs, which is a Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is a 3 to 6 month tour on a Marine vessel where you do mostly humanitarian work. I've been to everywhere, Philippines, Korea, Australia. I've even been to Russia. Russia, was cold and rainy. The people stink a little bit because they didn't really wear deodorant. I met this Russian soldier, and he had this little rat on his shoulder, and he said, "I love you, Melissa." And I was like, okay. It was a little weird. Back on ship, I had to be the NCO that gave all the female new joints, the brief on sexual assault and the dangers of it. But no one knew what happened to me because I never told. I love the humanitarian work we did. I've done everything to work in tuberculosis hospitals, to putting schools up, to playgrounds. I think that's a part of the Marine Corps that I love the best, and I don't think we get recognized for it.
In 1997, I took command of an engineering brigade. The Army runs a combat training center in the Mojave Desert of California. Very high tech. Think laser tag, except with tanks and jet airplanes. The brigade had 3 battalions in it, and the way the training center works is you send a battalion out to the training team. They put them through their paces. It was a lot like a pet obedience school. When the training's over, they send the battalion back to you better trained. It's a good deal. However, it doesn't leave a whole lot for me to do. And so I spent most of my time sitting on a hilltop watching the laser tag battles play out on the desert floor below. One day I was standing on a hilltop with the division artillery commander when a freelance reporter showed up. At the time, there was a lot of talk in the media about banning landmines. The Army had a new minefield system where you could put the minefield out, and when you didn't want it anymore, you could turn it off remotely and attack right through. It really gave you a great advantage over the enemy because that's the last place they expected you to come from. The freelance reporter looked at me and asked whether I would be willing to order my troops to move through one of those minefields. I'm proud to say that without hesitation, I told him that I would prefer to go through with them. I did 4 years at West Point and served 26 years in the United States Army with the finest people this country had to offer. In 2001, I took the uniform off for the last time. And then 9/11 happened.
I'm from Pennsylvania. My then mother-in-law worked at the World Trade Center. I was frantic. I ended up getting a hold of her, and she didn't end up going to work that day.
I was living in Maryland. I watched 9/11 on television. I don't know what it triggered, but I knew I had to get out of there.
I was still working and avoided television. However, my friend Luis, who was working in an office by himself, started having panic attacks. He made it through the day, went home, had trouble sleeping. The next day he came back to work. Panic attacks continued, and then he had crying spells. He called his doctor, told him to call 911. He drove himself to the hospital, where he spent 2 days.
I asked myself, what more could I do?
After Vietnam, for about 35 years, nobody except close family and a few friends knew about my military service. Hardly anybody knew about any of my experiences. My wife says that I had my story down to a science. People would inquire about military, and very kindly I would give them a response without giving up any information about my military. She says that immediately after telling that story, I was out of there. Without people even realizing that I had left. We never knew about all the problems my wife and I had early days of our marriage. We thought it was normal. I didn't think anything. But she tells me the stories about arguments where I would punch walls. Then I would come around, then she would put pictures on them until I got around to making repairs. I do remember waking up in the middle of the night when I had nightmares, where I had my wife by the neck or was pulling her hair. Shortly after I retired, I had an invitation from a dear friend to attend a veterans program in Maryland. I readily accepted without giving it any thought. We went to Maryland. I found it to be a very safe program immediately upon arrival, being among veterans from Vietnam. The program involved helping veterans tell their story. It involved process work, psychodrama. It was very safe, and I remember jumping when my turn came. I got right into my story for the very first time, talking about details of Vietnam. It went on, and suddenly all this anger came over me. Anger I had never experienced before. Oh, with all the emotions hollering. I was hollering about all the horrible things that I had done in Vietnam. All the stuff that led me to believe that I felt like someone had taken advantage of me, got me to do all these horrible things when I came back to my family. It went on, and finally, I was finished. For the first time, I had confronted Vietnam. I had talked to the demons, and I felt peace for the first time. It had gotten pretty hot in there. So immediately afterwards, they took me outside. My friend that had gone from Texas with me handed me a cell phone. On the other end of the cell phone was my wife. I started apologizing for the many things I had put her through, things that I had done to my family. It was an incredible experience. We talked for some time, or I talked because she didn't know what was going on, but said it was good. After that, our lives began to change. We were dealing with Vietnam. I was in therapy and getting a lot of help.
I knew I had to get out of Maryland, and I had friends in Houston, so I was homeless for a while in Houston too. Then U.S. vets got me off the street, and they helped me get a job as well at the VA hospital. Then the war broke out, and I'm thinking, there are people dying. There are soldiers getting their legs blown off, and I'm in my nice, cushy job with my nice white outfit on. I couldn't do it, so I re-enlisted. In 2010, I was deployed. The most horrible thing I saw in Afghanistan, that was the thing that didn't happen. I was stationed in Fob Gardez, and it was amazing. You could see a blizzard rolling down a mountain at you, rolling down at you from another mountain. We were on a mountain with some local Afghanis. They were helping us build our FOB, our base. Well, earlier that day, we were driving through the province of Gardez, and the locals were throwing rocks at us, and they were flipping us off. We were all very, very, very tense. It was an intense situation. And then, of course, the reports of the Afghanistan police, who were supposed to be helping us, turning and killing soldiers. And there we were on a mountain with the Afghans, intense. We had no protection. Well, their children were up there too, helping their fathers out on the mountain with us. And one of the children picks up a snowball and hits one of the soldiers in the face. And it's like, hey, that wasn't very nice. Then another kid picks up a snowball, and it's like, oh shit. Their fathers come out, and they're being protective of them. And they're kind of standing up, posing against us. Well, we were posing back, except we had our hands on loaded weapons. One of the soldiers took a snowball and struck one of the children. Their fathers got so angry. It was like if anybody picks up anything heavier than a snowball, we're going to have to shoot them. It was so quiet. It was like a standoff. We were staring at them, they were staring at us. Armed soldiers came up from behind. All of a sudden, the original kid who got hit in the face with the snowball, he starts grinning. And he throws another snowball. Well, everybody joins in, and we end up in the middle of a war zone in a big, stupid, funny snowball fight.
Really thankful for all the support my wife has given me. I'm really thankful for her convincing me that I couldn't hear, that I had to go to the VA, which turned into a diagnosis. One of the other things that happened was it got me a Purple Heart that I never even thought about. The story of the Purple Heart is that in Vietnam, we were out on a small patrol in the rice paddies and encountered some Viet Cong. Gave the order to move on them in the rice paddies. And while running, I came to the hedge grove that I had to go through. I remember the training to look for the thickest part of the hedgerow that you could go through because the open path probably had booby traps on them. So I looked for a thick part, ran through it, and it wasn't thick enough because I hit a punji stick. Reached down, pulled the punji stick out, threw it away, kept running. A punji stick is a piece of bamboo that has been sharpened. They put poison or anything they can find that will make the GI sick and go to the hospital once he gets stuck. Once it was over, said and done, one of the guys said, "Sarge, you need to get the medic. Your right leg is bleeding." I said, "Oh yeah, I got stuck. It was a punji stick." The medic came, put me down, scrubbed my wound, wrapped me up, put me on a convoy to the hospital, where I spent 3 days with the doctor scrubbing it and rewrapping it every day. Many years later, after I got my diagnosis at the VA, I was talking to a benefits officer. This story came up. Immediately he asked me, he said, "Do you have proof?" I said, "Yes, I do." I had just bought my third VA home, and I had found that when I bought the very first one, I had submitted hospital records. Why, I don't know, and I didn't remember doing that, but I found them. So I had proof. I was very fortunate because many soldiers in my position are never able to prove. About a year and a half later,
I get home from work. My wife says I have a package. After I changed clothes, I went and found the package and opened it up. It was a Purple Heart. Immediately, I was back in Vietnam. All the emotions, anger, stuff I couldn't explain came over me. So I closed the box. After I calmed myself down, I took it to my wife. She opens it up and gets so excited. Jumps on me, starts kissing me. It was tough. I didn't know what to do. She gets on the phone, starts calling her kids about Dad's new award. I get in the car and take off. Things keep coming up, and we continue to deal with them. For instance, this one, I was with my therapist the very next day, working on my new award.
My husband Jake started out as an enlisted communications soldier, and he did that for a number of years before he went into Army Special Forces. After a number of years of Special Forces, then he transitioned to flight school because he wanted to become a pilot, and he spent the last 6 or 7 years of his military career flying Chinooks. By the time I met Jake, he had already been serving in the Army for 13 years, and so staying in for another 7 or 8 years and reaching retirement was pretty much a no-brainer for our family. At the same time, though, I had this really incredible legal career in Houston, and the problem was it wasn't portable at all. You see, as an attorney, my license doesn't follow me when I move to a new state. If I wanted to go where Jake was and practice, what I would have to do is either take the bar exam again, pay huge relicensing fees, or sometimes it's both. Either way, you're spending a year in the process, and in the meantime, you can't work at all. For my family, me not working for a year was not even an option. And so it wasn't even a decision that I would stay in Houston and Jake would go wherever the Army sends him. We were a GO bachelor family. That's the Army humor for the situation. But the sad thing is that it's not even an uncommon situation in the military, because so many professions require a license from state to state. Every kind of legal professional, every kind of medical professional, teachers, even cosmetologists have to get a new license when they move to a new state. It's a big part of the reason why about 1 in 5 military families now have to live the way that mine does. A remote family, one spouse in one place, one spouse in the other, family, one place or the other. I started working with the Military Spouse JD Network in order to fight this issue and really make a difference, because my hope is that one day there will be military families don't have to make the choice that mine did about either having 2 incomes or being in the same place. Right before we got married, the Army sent Jake to Fort Polk in Louisiana. It's about 3 hours from Houston. And that began our weekly ritual of packing up the car on a Friday, driving to Louisiana, spending the weekend with him, and then packing the car up again on Sunday to get back to Houston so that I could be at work first thing on a Monday morning. And sometimes that would happen in reverse. Really, it was just whoever could get away. So for the first 2.5 years of my son's life, Jake was a weekend dad. And it wasn't ideal, but we made it work. Then, just before our son turned 3, Jake got orders to be sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, and that every weekend dad ritual was going to be maybe once or twice a month, and we just decided that's not workable for our family. So, much to my dismay, I actually did put my packet in to be relicensed in Kansas. I was almost finished with that process when we learned that pretty much as soon as Jake got to Kansas, he was going to be deployed to Afghanistan for about a year. Well, with that news, suddenly the idea of packing up and leaving behind my career, our friends and family, and my entire support network just seemed like a really horrible idea. And so, as my husband puts it, we were just going to have to embrace the suck. And that's what we did. We saw each other about every other week for those first couple of months while Jake was at Fort Riley getting ready for his deployment. Prior to being stationed with the Big Red One at Fort Riley, all of Jake's wartime deployments had been with Special Forces. And that's a really unique kind of deployment because Special Forces soldiers work on really small teams of very seasoned, specialized soldiers. And Jake's deployment with the Big Red One was going to be nothing like that. There were soldiers in his flight unit who were literally half his age. He could have been their dads. And a lot of them straight out of West Point or straight out of college, ROTC programs. I remember sitting in pre-deployment briefing about 3 weeks before they were going to deploy to Afghanistan. Full room, probably about 200 people in that room. And I just remember the commander, he gets up and he's making his introductory remarks and he asks, show of hands, who's about to go on their very first deployment? I look around and like 3/4 of the room have their hands in the air and I'm freaking out. I look at my husband and I say, well, you have all of their backs. Who's watching yours? My husband's not a freaker-outer. And so he just calm down. It'll be fine. Everything will be okay. And he was right about that. Jake deployed from Houston on a Tuesday. And to start with, it was like any other Tuesday. We got up, we had breakfast as a family, and then we took our son to daycare. We were walking down the hallway, holding our son's hand, about to drop him off, when just all of a sudden, I see my husband swoop down and hug my son really tight and then just take off. And when I see him turn, what I notice is that my husband is sobbing. My husband is not an emotional person. I can count, without using all my fingers, the number of times I've seen him cry in 9 years. So I didn't really know what to do with what I saw. Weepy is my job. But I took a deep breath, I got my son, I got him dropped off, and then I went to try and find my husband. Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. How am I going to process this? I mean, he's sad, obviously. He's about to leave his 3-year-old for a year, and that has to be heartbreaking. But then there's a part of me that's wondering, are these sad tears or are these afraid tears? Is there some part of him that's concerned he might not make it back? I mean, what is this? I never see my husband cry. What is this? Is this sad tears or is this scared tears? I really didn't know. Almost asked him.
The first few years of my military experience was just as my recruiter promised me. I went through training, went to AIT, trained as a paralegal specialist. I drilled 1 week in a month, and I trained 2 weeks out of the summer. It would be May of 2009, shortly after graduation, that I would deploy to Iraq. We would first go through training, and we would end up in country by November of that year. We were in the southern part of Iraq, and when I first arrived there, I shadowed a unit out of Oregon. It was a bunch of legal work. Got to sit in on a court-martial, type up Article 15s, but there was other things to it as well. I also had insight on a lot of other things that were going on base. Suicides, drug overdoses, things of that nature. Our mission changed more than once. At one point, I would even have to gear up and go on missions. On a mission morning, we would get up the wee hours, go through our briefing, and then head out. You see, we were tasked to fuel these generators that would pump water onto our base, and that's how we were able to have running water. I would get out of the Humvee and pull guard. In my AO, I would pull guard and stand ready until the generators were fueled. Most times it seemed like boring work, and occasionally things might happen. Most of the time we had to watch out for locals. You think you're out in the middle of nowhere, but literally children would just appear. It's like they would come out of the sand. And we would do things like bring extra water and food for them, but they would have to wait until we were done. This particular morning, I was pulling guard as I usually do, and I see a young boy in my sight. So I tell him to stop, but he didn't listen. So I'm like, okay, maybe he didn't hear me. Oh, Goff! He's still moving. At this second, training kicks in. Because what you learn is that women and children are most likely to be suicide bombers. So my weapon then goes from the rest position up to the ready position. So I tell him to stop again. And he stops. For a split second, I didn't know if I was going to actually have to use my weapon. And that was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. But my deployment really wasn't that bad. I mean, honestly, I didn't see anybody die. I didn't get hit with anything. And although our base did get hit a few times, they were never really close enough to cause any damage. And the one time that they did hit us close, it only took a piece of our gem out, and shrapnel hit the Humvees. I spent holidays there and even my birthday. But they were fun. I mean, we're a Texas unit. We even managed to barbecue out in the desert. Don't know about the meat very much, but we still barbecued. And on my birthday, I went to salsa night. We had a DJ and a speaker, and on a slab of concrete in the middle of the desert, I salsa on my birthday. And on one mission, we even passed the Euphrates River. I made it a point to actually put my hands in the Euphrates. Granted, that river was the same water that the locals would both bathe and crap in. But I mean, it was the Euphrates. We were right outside the city of Ur, the same land that Abraham walked on, the same place that most people can only read about in the Bible or watch on the History Channel. And these moments were beautiful to me.
My son Howie is such a proud military kid. So proud of his daddy. And during the deployment, Howie understood. He understood at 3 years old that his dad had to go away to help people. And he also understood that his daddy couldn't come home until the job was done. He understood, and he was proud. But that didn't stop the sad times from coming. And that presented a really big challenge for me. Because how do you explain 300 days to a kid that can't count to 10? I'll be honest, I actually got off pretty easy at first. Howie was used to not having his dad around, and it took nearly 2 months before he realized he wasn't getting weekends with his dad anymore. And when he did start asking questions, I actually handled it pretty well at first. I would give Howie this big, "Your daddy's the hero," pep talk, and he would be okay. He would go about his day. He was okay. I wasn't. After the 6th, 7th, 10th time I had to deliver that pep talk to my son, it just hit me. I can't. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this for a year. I can't. I'm going to lose my mind. What am I going to do? So I racked my brain about how to make my son understand, and I came up with an idea. I made him a paper chain with 300 links in it. The thing was huge. I hung it in our house, and it strung from the top of our 2nd floor down the banister all the way to the 1st floor, and it spread out all over the floor. And every night before Howie went to bed, he would pull one link off of that paper chain. And you know what? It worked. Because every night when he pulled that chain link off of the chain, he would say, one less, Mommy." And he understood in some very basic way that chain was getting smaller and we were getting closer to his daddy. It didn't stop all the sad times from happening. At Christmas that year, there were 100 links left in that chain. On his birthday, there were 20. And those were hard days. But watching that chain get smaller and smaller, I watched that hope pop up in my son's eyes. He got it. He understood that the waiting was going to come to an end. And one day his daddy would be home and we would all be together again. And so happy. And we were so happy when his daddy finally made it home. That's not to say that it was easy. Because if there's one word for reintegration, it is complicated. Jake came home. He'd been gone nearly a year. And he would get really frustrated when the things he used to do to discipline our son or even play with our son just didn't work anymore. It took a while to talk him through the fact that our son is a year older. We have to try new things. Things are different now. And it wasn't just Howie. We had been apart for 10 months. I'd been doing everything myself. The bills, the lawn, the laundry, keeping everything running. And he'd been laser focused on his mission and keeping his men alive. It was really, really tough. A really rocky time. Finding our groove again. But we did. Jake's retired from the military now. The truth is that if he had been unattached, if he didn't have a family, he probably would have spent another 15 years serving. He loved being Army. And he just really got tired of being away from us. And I have a lot of fault in that, because the truth is that I'm the reason, my career is the reason that we had to be apart in the first place for a lot of the time. And we agonized over the decision. We thought long and hard, and we talked it over and over. And eventually, one day, Jake just came to me and said, "Look, I'm finished with Special Forces. The Army has plenty of pilots. It's time for us to move on to the next phase."
Around 2009, I was recruiting out of San Diego. It was kind of stressful. I was making about 250 to 300 phone calls a day, and we had to have 3 applicants come in for interviews, and then 3 applicants make it as to join the Marine Corps. During that time, I was also dealing with endometriosis. So on any given week, about 3 times a week, I was going to the emergency room, and my CO, my commanding officer, was furious. So not only was I dealing with my CO, my family, the Marine Corps, but I was stressed out. So I ended up getting GOS, which is good of service. That was pretty much a career ender for me. And I went from recruiting back to the fleet. And while I was back there, I was in limbo because I didn't know where they wanted to stick me for my job, which I felt like a failure because I went from recruiting duty to back to my old job. And no one knew what I was going through as far as just being stressed out, feeling like a failure. So at one of my visits, I ended up telling my psychiatrist that I didn't want to kill myself. I just wanted to kind of go asleep and not wake up. So that put me on a 72-hour hold in the psych ward. From there, they ask you questions. You know, have you ever binge drank? Yes. Have you ever had more than 4 drinks or something? Of course. So I check out of the 72-hour hold, and I get put into a 45-day substance abuse facility. From there, I go back to my unit, and I'm considered a shitbird. I don't have a job. They don't know where to stick me. I just came out of this facility, and I feel like when the Marine Corps doesn't know what to do with you, and you're broken, or you're no longer of use to them, then they just drop you because you're nothing to them anymore. So, yeah, that's what happened.
When it was time to go home, we headed to El Paso. That's where we would out-process. And then prior to going home, they have you fill out all these VA check forms. Are you feeling this? No. Are you feeling that? No. You know, do you drink too much? All of these questions. I mean, how do they ask you if you're drinking too much before you even have a chance to go home and have a drink? Check no. I was ready to go home. I mean, I'm 22 years old. I had deployed straight out of college. I'm ready to go see my friends, pick up where I left off, go have a drink. But the first time I actually got to link up with my friends, it just didn't feel right. The conversations didn't interest me. We were just in 2 different places. I mean, all this talk about new shoes and style and the new phone that's recently come out. I had just left a country where children didn't even have shoes. I didn't have a job to go back to because I had deployed right after graduation. I was struggling, but I never let it on to my family. I've always had this go-getter dynamic. Get it done, no matter what it takes. I would manage to get a good contracting job at Ellington Field. I was living with my then fiance, now husband, at the time. He would be the only person to really know that I was struggling internally. He would actually confront me about it. I remember at one point he asked me, "Do you know you jump in your sleep?" I never felt it. And then later on, he became really concerned with me drinking. He felt like I drank too much. And for me, a bottle of wine with dinner, that wasn't a lot, and maybe it was a little more, but at the end of the day, I knew that his grandmother had passed cirrhosis of the liver, so part of me really felt like that was the problem. He was oversensitive because of that. It wasn't that I was drinking too much. Later on, though, there would be a night that I would come home highly intoxicated. Usually this is when we argued the most. And it even led to me having to be hospitalized because I had blacked out. We had a lot of stressors going on financially and just with everything that I had going on. One night, after a heated argument, I left our house. I'm really not good with confrontation, and so for me, the easiest thing to do is to remove myself from it. However, on this night, I would leave, and I drove to my high school track. I wasn't in a good place. I remember driving up to the track, reaching into my glove compartment and pulling out my pistol. I even put the barrel to my chin to see what it felt like. For a second, I really didn't know if I was going to pull the trigger or not. That night, Aaron would find me. As soon as I saw those headlights, I put my pistol back in the glove compartment, and it would be years before he even really knew about that moment. But my breaking point was after another heated argument, most likely due to me being intoxicated and not dealing with my emotions. And I got in my car and I shot off. I didn't know where I was going to go at first. I ended up driving to Galveston. During that drive, I literally remember praying to God that a semi-truck or something would hit me so that I wouldn't have to do it myself. I made it to the seawall, and I went right to the edge. The currents were really swift that night, and I knew that it wouldn't be hard to just jump in and be taken. I just didn't want to live anymore. Shortly after that, I would get professional help. I started seeing a therapist, but one of the first things she asked me was about my childhood. She didn't ask me anything jumping into my military career or my deployment to Iraq. She would find out that my mother had passed and other issues that manifested. It had come to surface that I had been suffering with a depressive order almost my entire life, and I didn't even know it.
I've had this newspaper for many years. The Army Reporter, dated January 27, 1969. One of the lead articles titled "Infantry Upsets Ambush." In that article, I'm quoted as saying, "We came up on some brush and I saw a leg sticking up. Suddenly, an NVA jumped up with a grenade. He tried to pull the pin, but he wasn't fast enough." All these years, I've had this newspaper, and Probably looked at it 2 or 3 times, but in my mind I was always thinking that I didn't say that. I knew I hadn't said that. I thought that the writer, who turned out to be a friend of my wife from Austin, had simply took that from our conversation, because I did talk to him, and did that just to get my name and my hometown in the newspaper. About 3 years ago, I went to my first military reunion at Fort Benning, Georgia. I ran into a couple of guys from my squad, a couple of guys from the platoon that I knew well. During our week together, during conversations, the article would come up. I would inquire if they remember this. Finally, the guy that was the driver on my track said, "Yeah, Sarge, it was you and I. After that firefight, you and I headed in the same directions to do a clearing." And this guy jumped up and scared the shit out of me. He said, "But you simply open up and almost cut him in half." Luckily, I returned from Fort Benning with my wife, and the next day I had an appointment with my psychiatrist. I've been thinking about it for the last couple of years after one of my kids got involved with the Brene Brown program. And so this year my wife and I started the program, and it's been an incredible experience. I've gotten some more healing, and both the relationship has also gotten a lot from it. Another place that we get healing is that after that trip that I made to Maryland and experienced that Veterans Weekend, I came home and founded Texas for Heroes. And so the program is an opportunity to offer veterans what I went through at no cost. And of course, there's always healing every time I participate. Healing for my wife, my kids, a few times they've participated. So it's always been about healing for me, and I'm so thankful. I knew in the beginning that it was a big thing. I just never realized that it was this big.
To this day, I'm still dealing with my rape. I still go to therapy. I still dealing with the nightmares. But I do have support in my family and friends. While I was on recruiting duty, I would tell the females, applicants that were joining that, you know, there's going to be creepy guys, and there's a possibility that bad things could happen to you, but take everything you could from the Marine Corps, travel, education, and then get the hell out, because the Marine Corps is going to take from you what they can, and just take it from them before they can take it from you. And I am proud of being a Marine. I'm proud that I've earned it. I guess in the end, I just try not to feel so jaded.
Sometimes Jake is happy to be out of the military, especially right now, for instance. We just this year adopted a little girl from the Philippines, Josie. She just turned 4. And I know that he has been happy to get to be home for her. But he misses it too. And sometimes he misses it a lot. When you're in the military, shared experiences all around you. Of course, when you get out, you have to go and find it. And now Jake is going through the process of trying to find it here in Houston. We're both really active in the community here. I sit on the board of Leadership Houston, and I chair debates and forums for the League of Women Voters. I do a lot of work around engaging, educating, that kind of thing. Jake is really more focused on mentoring. That's where his heart is, and that's where he's plugging in here. I think for me, living this military life has been a crash course in resilience. Not just because of the things that I have experienced, but just by being surrounded by people who have been through so much more. It's the, young mother with small children who's weathering multiple deployments, or the caregiver trying to help a wounded warrior recover, or the Gold Star spouse who's made the ultimate sacrifice and, still somehow finds a way to raise children and contribute to their communities. It's incredible. And it's taught me perspective in amazing and sometimes kind of harsh ways. See, as an attorney, the big things in life are just really not so big. Some days I'll come home from work complaining, it's angry about a negotiation that didn't go the way I wanted it to, or, I wish I'd said this, or I wish I'd done that, or that didn't go the way I wanted to, and just all in a huff. And my husband will listen, and then he'll look at me, and he'll just, in his very Jake way, nobody shot at you today.
True.
It's true.
Which is true. But it's also infuriating. But, it's really taught me that everything we have in this life, it comes at a cost. And I'll be honest, it's not really a cost I even gave much thought to at all until it was smack in the middle of my family. But the truth is, it's smack in the middle of every community in this country. Say what you will about politics and what have you, but a big part of the problem that we have in America today is that so few people have any firsthand understanding of what that sacrifice looks like. They don't get it, which is disheartening. But it's also really motivating to me to continue being out there and being that voice, because it needs to be heard.
Aaron and I did get married in 2012, and in 2014 we had our son, Noah. And then before that I got out of the military. And I would go to school and actually start learning about mental health in veterans, which would lead me into the career network that I'm in today. It was actually a state organization called the Military Veteran Peer Network that would be that force to network me into the world of veteran service organizations. I had no idea of all the help and assistance that was out there for veterans such as myself and you guys, and for family members. Hell, had I known, I wouldn't have struggled half of what I did. What I have learned is that in life, things happen according to God. Had I never joined the military, I wouldn't have had a platform to actually address the mental health issues that I was going through. It also wouldn't have given me the platform to actually want to change the culture of mental health today. We can't depend fully on government agencies. They're doing the best they can, but it takes this right here. It takes community. It takes support. It takes us having each other's backs, just like we did when we were in the service.
I'm in school now. I'm attending school at UHD, University of Houston, downtown. I'm studying psychology. Everything about the mind fascinates me. I want to know what breaks it, what happens. The military, I think it gave me discipline. It helped me find myself, and more than anything, it took me off some very violent streets. I was a broken, damaged person, but on that psych ward, I balanced out. Everybody there was damaged. And I learned I'm actually really comfortable around damage. I would think everybody here is fucked up. And everybody can use a little help. And I got to do that. And I got to help people, and that was huge. It gave me a voice. I learned to speak out. I went to Austin, and I actually helped to testify to get a bill passed that helped women who'd been assaulted in the military. Here was the very shy kid who went from the streets of New Jersey to big mountains in Afghanistan to helping getting laws passed. And that very shy, damaged kid is now leading the charge.
I retired in 2001 after 3 combat deployments. Somalia was the hardest. But without question, the thing that gives me the greatest satisfaction is that I never had to send a soldier home in a body bag. Wasn't that I was that good. We were lucky, and the good Lord smiled upon us. The unfortunate part is that I'm no longer in those intense situations. And I think, as a result, my faith has diminished a little bit. When I was in personal danger and responsible for the lives of others, I regularly turned to God for help. Now it's sad because it's almost too easy here. We're not really challenged. We're not really tested. And that's our loss. Without fear, there's no need for courage. And in the absence of misfortune, or danger, or desperation, there's less need for faith. Faith in the Almighty, faith in each other, faith in whatever you believe. I'm proud of my military service and grateful for having had those intense experiences. But it saddens me and burdens my heart when I hear terrible stories like some we heard today. It makes me wonder, where was their officer? Where was their best chance? I'm proud to be here today with you all. You are truly my brother and my sisters. David Washachek, United States Army, retired.
Samuel Luna, United States Army.
Valerie James, United States Army.
Melissa Massey, United States Marine Corps, retired.
Rita Hicks, Army spouse, military families advocate.
Talisa Keel, Texas Army National Guard.